Hello and welcome to another segment of Musicians Speak with your host, Joseph Celli, where I have an opportunity to meet with new music creators of all genres and discuss their work. I'm really pleased to be interviewing Ingrid Laubrock, improviser, composer, saxophonist, and band leader today. Before we say hello to Ingrid, let's open up with a short work of hers from her 2019 release entitled Utter, performed here with drummer Tom Rainey. We've just heard a performance of Clickety Smash Boom by saxophonist-composer Ingrid Laubrock with Tom Rainey on drums from the CD entitled Utter on the Relative Pitch record label. Ingrid was originally from Germany. She's now based in Brooklyn, one of the great hotspots for improvised music these days. She's won numerous awards, including the BBC Jazz Award for Innovation, the SWR German Radio Jazz Prize, and a number of Downbeat Annual Critics Poll as both a soprano sax performer and subsequently as a tenor sax performer, as well as commissions from the American Composers Orchestra, Anthony Braxton's Tricentric Foundation, and most recently the very prestigious Herb Alpert Prize in Composition. Ingrid, welcome to Composers Speak, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you hear everything okay, Ingrid?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I'm so glad that you're here between what looks like a really rambunctious schedule that you have. Ingrid, might you tell our listeners a little bit about your early musical years in Germany and then what brought you to the United States?
Well, I grew up in a very small place in Germany, right at the Dutch border, and there wasn't there wasn't much happening culturally in that space. It was really a small village attached to a small town. But both my parents were big music lovers and also amateur musicians. My dad played piano. Both my parents sang in choirs, and my dad was a huge Beethoven fan. So there would be a lot of music in our in our household. I learned piano, I think, from the age of 7 or 8 onwards, and I sang in choirs too. I played recorders, whatever was available in that space at the time. And I moved away from Germany when I was 18. I moved to Berlin and then to London, where I started picking up the saxophone.
And how did you just decide to pick up the saxophone in London?
I think I'd been attracted to the instrument for several years, and but sort of lacked the confidence to try it out. And when I moved cities, when I moved to a larger city where nobody knew me, I just decided to start playing and played in public, played in the subway, and just kind of got used to having masses of people hear me, see me, and sort of it was almost like a shock therapy. And I fell in love with it. I just fell in love with playing and started playing with other people, and just enjoyed the newfound freedom in improvisation, because I'd been brought up strictly with classical music, and there was just this freedom of like making decisions in the moment.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like music was a part of your household. And, 100 years ago or so in the United States, that was true here also, that, families would play music together or get around the piano and sing together and things like that. We don't have much of that tradition anymore. We tend to be absorbing all the time and not participating. So that was a beautiful thing with you and your family.
Yes, definitely. It's sort of a very much a white middle class German tradition, I think.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful. I used to accompany my mother singing Schubert songs, and my dad would play kind of musical games with us. It was my mother in particular opened up a whole sort of way of listening for me that I think I got a lot out of. Like she would play records that were pretty programmatic, like Peter and the Wolf or Carnival of the Animals or Bolero or things like that, and show us how instruments could be representative of a certain, or could evoke a certain image. And they introduced us to very long form compositions, like they would sing Bach's St. Matthew Passion.
Yeah.
And take us along, So we were kind of used to stay with it and to listen to really hours of music at the time.
And when you went to Berlin, you said, or was it in London that you started playing in the subway or the tubes? Was it in London?
Yeah, in London in the tube.
Uh-huh. And did you need to get a permit to do that, or what do you do?
No, it was illegal.
It was illegal.
It definitely wasn't legal at the time, but I mean, it was like a strange system of semi-toleration by some policemen and then not by others.
Uh-huh.
But what would happen is that there was a whole kind of system that the buskers had. Buskers are street musicians in England, where we would like arrive at a platform. There would be a hidden piece of paper somewhere in the wall or in a any kind of crook and any kind of nook that had like a hours written on it and names of the buskers next to them. So there was a secret list in most stations that were decent, where you could write your name in, and there was sort of an honor system.
Oh, nice!
You would have your slot, but if the police moved you on, you would have to leave and find another station, and that happened a lot.
I see.
So it was sort of it was a little dance around.
So were those early days in the tubes, were those soprano sax or tenor sax days?
Alto.
Alto. A little bit easier to move with the alto than the tenor.
Yeah. Playing jazz standards with a friend who was showing me a lot about harmony, and so in a way it was education for me. I would play for like 2-3 hours. We were surviving of this for about a year, and then go home and practice.
Yeah.
It was a good. I think it was, in a way, it was good for me to do, especially to overcome this kind of shyness, performing anxiety.
Well, the saxophone is one of the most developed horns in the improvised music scene, with, of course, some of the most brilliant improvisers in the history of this music being sax players. And you've developed a very identifiable sound, but also a really strong individualistic approach to the horn. Who were some of the players that maybe inspired you, and what was the process for you in developing your own voice on the instrument?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, first of all. I mean, I learned really a lot from transcription. I didn't have that much formal education in terms of saxophone lessons. I did have one teacher in London called John Toussaint who showed me a lot about his harmonic system and who made me copy him, and we'd play for like 3 hours, and so he would show me things, but it was less saxophone oriented than to do with theory and things like that. Mm-hmm. So most of, like, in terms of saxophone playing, I got a lot out of really seriously transcribing musicians, spending like months on a solo, like basically, say, taking a solo of what did I do? For example, I transcribed the Eternal Triangle of both Sonny Stitt and Sonny Rollins solos, which were substantial, very long solos. Yeah. And I would spend maybe 2 months on each of them, learning them by heart, then kind of analyzing them and, finding phrases and transposing them to all keys. So this was like, in a way, like having lessons with Sonny Rollins and then lessons with Sonny Stitt, and by like trying to exactly copy them, you learn a lot about what you need to do physically to create a certain sound. So I did that with John Coltrane, with some Joe Henderson, Wayne Shorter, Lester Young.
Certainly transcribing John Coltrane was not an easy task.
Yeah, but it's it's a challenge, but it's also super rewarding because it trains your ear like nothing. Uh-huh. You learn where anything is on the saxophone, and emulating somebody's sound teaches you so much about the instrument and yourself, actually, your physical self. Yeah. So that was extremely important to me. But then there was also I never wanted to sound exactly like somebody else because I felt like, that felt like not doing them any justice, because each of these musicians were so personal and developed something so special that I felt like that is the ultimate goal, is trying to figure out what you want to do with all of this.
Well, I always thought it was so extraordinary that you could put on 5 recordings of Body and Soul and by 5 different saxophone players, and within the first measure, you could identify each of them because the sound was so personal, the interpretation was so personal, the rhythmic aspect of it, and so forth and so on. And that's a very different than classical music, where there tends to be not as much personality brought to it.
I think that's the beauty in jazz is definitely with the freedom of expressing yourself. Like in classical music, it is predetermined by the composer to a big degree. I mean, I think there's still a lot of room for interpretation, but it's not the same as being able to choose which notes, which rhythms, and the form of expression. It's of course.
Well, of course, if you're playing Cornelius Cardew, you could take and choose certain notes, but we won't discuss that right now. The first cut that we heard from your Utter CD, released in 2018, with Tom Rainey, it isn't common to hear a duo of sax and drums, but the two of you had many years of working together. Might you speak a little bit about the musical relationship and how a sax and drum duo works in contrast to, let's say, maybe more traditionally a sax and bass or sax and piano or something else? How does it work for the two of you?
Well, first of all, this is so the duo is like a collaboration. It's not like my record but a duo record. We work on that together. Well, Tom and I are part of many different formations. Like he has a trio that I'm in. He's in my band's Anti-House. He's in my new sextet, which I think you saw at Firehouse 12. We play duo together. I'm also in his standards band, Obligado. We were part of Kris Davis's Capricorn Climber. So we've had and my band, who are now no longer working, but we have a working relationship where we play composed music, sometimes difficult composed music, as well as freely improvised music, and like a very big kind of breadth of things that we do with each other. And so we've have this kind of relationship where we work on composed music, say if I compose something for a sextet, we will rehearse this duo first for quite a while. So we have like a sort of backbone that we can form in these groups. But we have from the beginning always enjoyed improvising with each other, and I think it's if you play with unusual combinations, you kind of challenge the roles of the instruments a little bit more. In other words, we can go to the traditional role where he's playing rhythm and time behind me, and I'm having a more soloistic saxophone role on top of it. But we can also flip roles, and I'm accompanying him, or I'm playing multiphonics or effects or whatnot, and he has an improvising role over it, or we color each other's contributions. So we kind of just assume that we can be anything in this combination. On that particular CD, we have now 3 CDs, and Other is the last one. And on that particular CD, we also composed some music together, which we then rehearsed, memorized, so that we could, like, when we play duo concerts, we could flip in and out of these compositions just by using very small musical cues. In other words, if we're in the middle of an improvisation, somebody plays a musical cue, we jump to this composition. So it has the strange effect of like having a paper torn and or suddenly flipping a page over. So that was a fun thing to explore. And
have you been? Were you a fan of one of John Coltrane's final recordings with the duo with Rashid Ali?
Actually, to be honest, that was I think Interstellar Space was the first. The first time we played a duo concert was for the Arts for Art series in New York, and it was, I think, commemorating an anniversary of Interstellar Space.
Wow!
They asked several saxophone and drum duos, and we were one of them. So that is actually how we started performing. It's funny that you should bring that up. This is definitely how we started performing as a duo.
Well, it's one of my all-time favorite recordings, and of course, nowadays on a lot of the jazz programs, you get to hear Coltrane, but rarely do you get a chance to hear that on the radio.
The later stuff doesn't get
played.
Much.
Well, I think we should hear one more cut from the Utter CD with Tom Rainey on drums. And in this cut, Murmur, you initially used the tenor sax in sort of an extended manner, sort of a non-traditional manner. And then a little into the piece, there's some beautiful multiple pitches or multiphonics. And maybe you can tell our listening audience a little bit what you're doing there.
Yeah, as far as I remember, I used the microphone in the bell, or fairly very, very close to the bell, and very amplified, so that the key clicks create almost like a feedback loop.
Right.
And I'm using it in a more rhythmic way, making the pads basically become percussion instruments. The multiphonics is, I don't know how far I should go into.
Well, I think that...
but multiphonics are basically chords, more than one note played at once on the saxophone, which is manipulating the whole bore of the saxophone in a kind of... You open keys that you normally wouldn't, or you have key combinations that you normally wouldn't have, that make the tone crack and basically bring out certain overtones on top of the fundamentals. So you have basically a chord played on the saxophone.
Yeah, for our listeners, at the beginning then, you're going to hear some key clicks and from this very highly amplified saxophone. So there's a whole rhythmic element that's bringing to it. And then what Ingrid is doing a little bit later in the program is this concept of multiple pitches. We tend to think of the saxophone and most wind instruments as being melodic instruments that play one pitch. They have a harmonic possibility. It's not standard chords, but they tend to be unique to both the instrument, but also the player and how the player, he or she, is approaching it. So let's give a listen again to the duo of Ingrid Laubrock on tenor saxophone and Tom Rainey on drums, performing Murmur from the CD entitled Utter on the Relative Pitch Records. We've just been listening to a duo recording with our guest today, Ingrid Laubrock, performing with drummer Tom Rainey from the Relative Pitch Records. My name is Joseph Celli, and you're listening to Musicians Speak, a series of interviews where I have the opportunity to meet with new music creators of all genres and discuss their work. If you'd like to hear other interviews in this series, please visit josephcelli.com, and I strongly encourage you to visit Ingrid's website, located at www.ingridlaubrock.com, where there's all kinds of good information about her various recordings that you can get, upcoming performances, and some really informative background info. Once again, her website is INGRIDLAUB as in boy, ROCK.com. Check it out. It's really worth visiting. Ingrid, you've had a lot of experience with various masters of the improvising music world, such as Anthony Braxton, Muhal Richards Abrams, Jason Moran, as well as some of the most notable younger musicians, including Kris Davis, Tyshawn Sorey, Mary Halvorson, Tom Rainey, Tim Berne, Dave Douglas, among others. And you also have several different bands, including Anti-House, Uba Tuba, Serpentines, Sleep Thief in your octet. Could you tell us a little bit about these groups and the differences in terms of how you approach it as both a composer and an improviser?
Could you ask that question one more time?
Sure. You've got a number of different groups that you're performing with, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about how you approach each group, if there's a difference in terms of your compositional or improvisational approach to each of them. Are some of them primarily free improvisation? Are some of them more thoroughly composed? Or how do you approach the various groups that you have and, sort of the distinctiveness of each of them?
Right. I think that different groups, like I do write differently for different groups. Most of the bands that are my particular bands, actually all the bands that are my bands, involve composition, but I'm also part of ensembles that improvise and don't use any predetermined compositions, such as Tom Rainey's trio, for example, or Tom and I, Tom Rainey's and my duo. We mostly improvise too. There are bands like Uva Tuba, for example, which is not longer really working or at least at the moment isn't working anymore, but which was a group that consisted of drums and 4 wind and brass instruments.
Yeah.
It was trombone, tenor saxophone, alto saxophone, and tuba, plus drums. So for that group, I decided to not write from the piano, which is my normal go-to instrument, but to write either completely in my head and just notate what I'm hearing, or to write from the saxophone, because I felt it needed to be about breath, and it needed to be about normal, about breath and flow. Most of the things that I write, I start on the piano, because you have this, because you can hear several notes at once, which just is such a helpful writing tool. And what I often employ, like, different strategies for different pieces, different strategies of how to incorporate improvisation into my pieces. I sometimes try to, like in my band Serpentines, for example, I was writing for musicians with very different backgrounds, like Sam Pluta is a new music composer, plays electronics. Mia Masaoka is an improviser who plays koto. And Craig Taborn and Tyshawn Sorey are jazz musicians. Tyshawn is somewhere the glue between all of it. Dan Peck is also a classical musician as well as a jazz musician. So there were different kind of skill sets and different things that I wanted to bring out in musicians. So I may have, for example, given Dan Peck something highly composed because it's something that he's very comfortable playing, and I don't. Sam Pluta is not somebody who would due to the nature of his instrument, read very concise rhythms, for example. So I would find different ways of incorporating skill sets of musicians.
Right.
And I think that is my general MO. It's basically identifying what I really love about a musician and trying to bring that out and find like a good platform for them to play. A little bit like, from like similar to, I would think like somebody like Mingus or Ellington wrote very specific platforms for musicians to shine over,
Right. So are your pieces then, if they're specific to instrumentalists, as pieces, if someone else came along, another musician, and said, Ingrid, I'd like to play some of your music, is it easily transferable, or is it music that's so specific to certain musicians that that's not so easy to do?
No, I think it's transferable. I think like when it's notated. Most of my stuff is notated in a way.
I see.
It can easily be read by anybody, but the creation of them definitely it always has certain musicians.
The band you have that band in mind that you're writing for. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because certainly
they inspire me. It makes it.
Yeah.
I know, for example, you're talking about Kris Davis. I know her playing so well that I can almost imagine it, while I'm writing.
Yeah. So you mentioned Mingus, and certainly Mingus wrote very specifically, but also his music was played by many, many other people. In a moment, I thought we would listen to your band Anti-House, for which you composed all of the music. With Anti-House, is the music a combination of composition as an improvisation? Sort of what is the balance there? And what would be typically a composition for this group? Are you providing musicians with rhythmic structures, harmonic changes for improvisation, melodies? What are you actually, providing them?
Yeah. Well, for Anti-House, most of the music tends to be pretty. There's a lot of writing. I occasionally use forms like, I use like vamps or structures. I think the track you're about to play was. Can you remind me, Joseph?
Yes, Face the Piper Part 2.
Face the Piper. So Face the Piper Part 2 has definitely a vamp and like a form for Mary to play over. But I also use, sometimes I prescribe textures. I definitely, because you have the guitar and I write for piano and guitar, where I'm seeing the guitar sometimes as a harmonic extension of the piano, but I also try and use the texture, like the similarity in textures, rather than in traditional jazz where a piano is supposed to be in one space and the piano and the guitar in the other, and you avoid the clashes. I sometimes try and actually emphasize the clashes in the textural clashes.
Yeah.
There's a fair amount of writing for anti-house, but I tend to keep the improvisations open so that we can find a different path to connect composition and improvisation every time we play it.
Well, the recording sounds really fantastic. You've got such brilliant musicians you're working with here. Let's give a listen to Ingrid's group Anti-House, with Ingrid performing on sax, Mary Halvorson on guitar, Kris Davis on piano, John Herbert on bass, Tom Rainey, of course, on drums, and Oscar Noriega on clarinet, performing a work entitled Face the Piper, Part 2. We've been listening to a recording with our guest today, Ingrid Laubrock, performing with her ensemble Anti-House from the intact recording entitled Roulette of the Cradle. My name is Joseph Celli, and you're listening to Musicians Speak, a series of interviews where I have the opportunity to talk to people like Ingrid and other musicians who are creating new directions in music. I would like to hear other interviews in this series. Please visit us at josephcelli.com, and I strongly encourage you, as I did earlier in the program, to visit Ingrid's website, located at ingridlaubrock.com. That's INGRIDLAUB as in boy, ROCK.com. Ingrid, your composition, Vogelfrei, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes.
Your composition, Vogelfrei, for orchestra and soloists was chosen by the New York Times as one of the 25 best 25 classical tracks of 2018. The list also includes such notables as Beethoven, Bernstein, Britten, Glass, and Mahler, amongst others. So you were in very fine company. Congratulations. And your mom and dad in Germany must have been very proud of that, I would think. Don't you think?
I bet they were.
Vogelfrei was released on the CD entitled Contemporary Chaos Practices on Intact Records. Before we listen to this work, might you tell us a little bit about it? Is it correct that the German means outlaw? And could you tell us a little bit about the piece?
Yes, Vogelfrei can be either outlaw or the term of, like, it's also a term that literally translates as free as a bird.
Oh, really?
It originally meant free as a bird, and then it became a medieval word for outlaw. Basically, people who were no longer allowed inside the city walls for whatever reason. Maybe back in the day for stealing a loaf of bread or whatever. It was a harsh punishment back then. Anyway.
Well, I wouldn't think a harsh punishment is being as free as a bird.
No, not
That's
as free
lovely.
as a bird, but not being allowed back inside the city walls, maybe.
Yeah.
So I wrote this piece. I was after having lived in the UK, I think for 24 years. I had a residency in Germany in the city Murs, where I spent 6 months over a year, spread out over a year, being sort of a town improviser. And I had time to write this, to get into orchestral composition. I took a course with that George Lewis ran back in LA called the Jazz Composers Orchestral Institute. And as a result, wrote this piece that was then performed by the ACO or read by the ACO. The title refers a little bit to how I felt when I was back in Germany after such a long time. It felt like weirdly familiar, but also completely strange. So I felt like I was slightly outside the town walls, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
For our listeners, many of the German towns, especially some of the medieval towns, have big walls around them. That is typical of a lot of Western Europe. You would see them in Italy and France and Spain and other places like that. Mm-hmm. They were meant as ways of defense against intruders. Before we listen to the complete recording, I want to remind our listeners that this and other interviews can be heard at josephcelli.com. And Ingrid's website is full of great information, recordings, performances, her upcoming schedule. And even though this interview hopefully is something that you're enjoying, it's nothing compared to hearing her live. I had the opportunity of doing that about 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and it was acoustically exhilarating. It was a beautiful, beautiful performance. And Ingrid, is there anything else you'd like our folks to know about Vogelfrei before we roll it?
Yeah, I guess the other inspiration was photos that I took of sort of overground rail, like electric rail cables, I guess there would be, and pylons. the region I was in is the Ruhrgebiet, which is like an old coal mining and steel industry region, and it has a really extensive rail network. There's a bunch of huge cities connected with each other. Mm-hmm. So I kind of used the shapes that those power lines made and the grids they made as an inspiration. So there's a bunch of I think it plays a role because Vogelfrei has a very swirling kind of texture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. For our listeners, I want to mention that the work begins extremely softly. It features the following soloists: Mary Halvorson on guitar, Kris Davis on piano, Kate Woolley on trumpet, and of course Ingrid Laubrock on saxophone as soloists. And the group also has a vocal ensemble as well as the chamber orchestra, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ingrid, thank you very much for this opportunity to get to know a little bit more about your work, and good luck with all of your upcoming performances and projects. We look forward to hearing some of your upcoming releases. You've got a release coming up with Kris Davis, correct?
That's right.
And yes. When do you expect that to be out?
So it is being mastered at the moment. It will be out in April on Intact Records.
I see. Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to getting that on the air. And thanks to our listening audience. Please visit us again. And thank you so much, Ingrid, for this opportunity. We're going to listen to the full, I believe, 18 minutes of Vogelfrei. So thank you all, and enjoy this extraordinary music.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.